Yes. Ребята, всем привет. Я начну на английском специально для нашего гостя. So, dear colleagues, on behalf of International School of Upscaling Coaching and ICF Ukraine, I thank Lauron Buys, an MCC coach from South Africa, for your willingness to conduct a master-class for us, 5 ways to transform your coaching sessions and your clients. So, dear friends, this topic was chosen by the majority of your votes, so enjoy. And Lauron, in your newest post in LinkedIn, you wrote something that I personally strongly agree with, and that I understand you plan to talk about today. So there is a big difference between transactional and transformational coaching in terms of outcomes, and the way we coach needs to be different too, a difference that is normally acquired over time and over journey. So I look forward to giving you the floor, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Irina. I'm just going to share my screen quickly.
If you need any of my assistance, let me know.
One participant can share at a time. It won't let me share. Can you?
Yes, just one. Yes. Does it work? Please check.
Aha.
Yes.
Yes, except now I can't find my.
So now you are co-host, and you can demonstrate your screen.
I'm going to. But, sorry, I'm trying to get my presentation on the screen. I had it minimized before. Can I think I'm going to need to go out and come back in.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Okay. We're waiting. Okay. Сейчас Ларон перезайдет, потому что что-то не получилось запустить презентацию. Коллеги, мы договорились, я не знаю, кто-то видел мое сообщение или нет, если будут вопросы, но не готовы будете спрашивать на английском, пишите в чате, и Надя Шмарансер будет переводить и вопросы и ответы.
Technology, sorry. Now you should be able to hear.
It was on the screen.
Yeah. There you are.
Yes.
Can you hear me and see my screen? All right, thank you.
Yes, everything is perfect.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry about that. Technology is always scary at the beginning of these things. But thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. Just to start off with, I would like to share with you that we all thinking of you in the Ukraine. Lots of my colleagues and friends and people in South Africa are really supportive of you people in the Ukraine and feel for you, even if our government isn't making the same noises. So please know that. So today you've chosen for me to talk about 5 ways. I've changed this slightly, 5 ways to transform your coaching sessions and your clients' lives. Just to set up the logistics, it's going to take 35-40 minutes for me to give you the presentation. We then will have a Q&A, we can have a discussion where you can ask questions, and please feel free to ask them in your language, because I believe there is a translator present. And if you have any questions that you want to put into the chat box, please do that during the presentation. Just put a Q in front of it so that we recognize that they are questions rather than comments. And Irina, then perhaps you could read those to me at the end. So who am I? As you heard, my name is Lauron Buys. I am accredited with the ICF, and I'm a registered mentor coach there, and my mentor coaching program is registered with them. I work with professional coaches who want to further develop their coaching skills and capabilities, who want to explore how to deal with complex and challenging client situations, coaches who want to build a profitable business, ones that are on an accreditation journey, and even if they, well, not even, those that want a sounding board just to bounce things off someone. So that's who I am and what I do. As we start now, what I'd like to ask you to do, and perhaps you can put this in the chat room if you'd like, is to think about what's the one thing you think you might change in your coaching sessions that will transform those sessions. This is instead of a check-in. Irina, I can't see the chat room. Are we getting a response?
Land structure.
Structure? Is that right? Okay. Right.
Presence.
Presence.
Coaching position. Presence through the active listening skills. Contract goal setting. Right balance for focus on result.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll be talking about some of those things, but specifically and in passing. So thank you very much for doing that. Okay, so before we start, there's no such thing as a perfect session. No matter how experienced you become, you'll leave the sessions and you'll think, I should have asked this question, or that was a lousy question, or we can always do better. So it's about progress, and it's about using that progress to master your coaching at whatever level you're at. You can master it at ACC level or at PCC level, or those are just levels of experience. So obviously, the more you you master things, the more you'll go up those layers, but in terms of capability. But there's no such thing as a perfect session. And I'm not here to act as a guru today. I'm just going to share with you some of the thoughts that I've had over time about how we can do this better. So if we start off with the first way that I think that we can transform our coaching sessions, I always think that our clients bring to us a Rubik's Cube. Are you familiar with the Rubik's Cube? Okay, so, and they bring it to us, it's all messed up, and we need to deal with that. So when we start our session, at some stage early in the session, we ask a question like, so what do you want to talk about today? And the question is, what happens then? And the first thing I want to share with you is beware of the relief monster. The relief monster does this. He or she, depending on who you are, when the client responds, this is my Rubik's Cube, I want to talk about this particular Rubik's Cube. The relief monster says, oh, thank goodness they have something to talk about. Let's move on. Now we can start the coaching session properly. And I'm here today to say that that's not what we need to do. We need to start more deeply. The deeper we start, the better. Person rather than the problem. I'll elaborate on that in a moment. Can you hear me?
Can you please repeat a little bit last year phrase?
So when the client tells us what their issue is that they want to discuss, that's the time we need to start coaching the person, not the problem. And often the client has brought that issue to us and hasn't been able to resolve it themselves for this reason. I want to use a quote, an Einstein quote that you may be familiar with, and that is, we can't resolve our problems with the same level of thinking that caused them. And that's why our clients get stuck quite often. They can only think about that problem at the level of thinking that caused it, okay? And so we need to take them deeper. But so what do I mean by coaching the person and not the problem? So let's look at coaching the problem. Examples of that would be we focused on the problem. How long has this been an issue? What are some of the details? How does the boss get along with others in the team? Have you tried anything else? What have you tried? So these are all questions about the problem, okay? So what we're doing is we're getting the client to describe the problem to us, the coach. Examples of coaching the person are, and please, these aren't model answers, okay? So there are lots of others as well. So please don't use this as a list to ask. But things like, what makes this important to you? And what's the significance of that? And what would that mean to you? What's stopping you from resolving this? What types of things might you learn about yourself as we discuss this? How would we know that we had resolved this for you at the end of the session? So those are all about the person. We're looking at them, and as I say, we're focusing on the client, the problem, in inverted commas, becomes a mirror for the client's self-reflection and growth. Okay. It also means and what quite often the client brings that Rubik's Cube, if I can keep using that analogy or metaphor. And so if we just accept it as the session goal, what happens is the goalposts start changing as we start talking about it, and we find out that that's not the issue. Okay, and so that's the reason why we need to go deeper. The session goal is what happens during the session, what we want to achieve during the session. So it's supporting the client. It's about their growth. It's about, maybe about they want to come out of the session with a plan to do something, or it may be helping them to clarify their thoughts, unravel their thinking in the bottom right there. The client's objective, however, is something outside, external to the session. And we need to be clear about the distinction. They may be wanting to discuss something that's going to help them to do a good presentation or proposal, or maybe it's about public speaking. It could be anything, okay? But that's after the session, and it's external to the session. So the first thing the first important step, I think it's probably the most important step that we need to do is to start deeper, start more strongly. Be careful that the relief monster doesn't move you on too quickly. The second one, somebody mentioned about listening, is we need to listen above and for me especially, below the waterline. And I'm using the metaphor of an iceberg, and I'll explain it as we go along. But there's certain things that we can listen for that are above that waterline, and certain that are below the waterline. What we often do when we sometimes listen well, and sometimes we listen not so well. And that even happens sometimes in coaching sessions. But the big mistake that we often make, particularly when we're just starting coaching, is that we listen in our heads, what I call we listen in our heads. So we listen to respond. So I'm thinking of what's the next question? What's the next step in the process? Oh, I can relate to that. And then we project, okay? But we need to listen. Their heads. We need to understand what they're trying to say to us, so we could summarize it if you like. We need to understand how they are feeling about what they're talking about, and maybe even what they might be leaving out as they tell us their story. The big thing about listening is showing up. We need to be fully present. Some of you mentioned presence earlier. We need to be fully present. We need to be there completely for them. And we need to work out what's above the waterline. So let me explain what I mean by that. Above the waterline is the external things that they're talking about, their behavior, their actions, their reactions. So stuff you can see, stuff that's almost, well, no, not tangible, but stuff you can see. What's below the waterline is what's internal, happening inside them. So things like their way of thinking, their reasons for those actions or behavior, their beliefs about what's happening in their current narrative, their values, And overall, I put all those types of things together as their way of being. So listen for their way of being in their current narrative. And so why that's important is because those things at the bottom are the things that can pivot what's above the waterline. So we think that we can change our behaviors, our habits, the things that are automatic, autopilot reactions to certain things that trigger us, for example. But we can't. We can agree cognitively in our heads that that's necessary. We need to change it, and I'm going to diet from tomorrow. Okay, but we all know that that's easier said than done, even though we know we have to or should. It doesn't necessarily happen, and that's because our whole way of being is a habit. It's a habit that is perhaps not our way of being, and this is in respect of that Rubik's Cube. Remember, I'm not saying in our lives generally. Our way of being in respect of that is a habit, and it's not serving us. So we need to change. We can only change what happens above the waterline if, in a sustainable way, if we change what's below. So I believe and so this is the action that comes. If I want to change that action, I need to change, for example, my belief about that. Okay. And so the pivotal areas are where we should be, what we should be listening for. That's where the power is. Sorry, let me just go. I want to give you an example from a couple of weeks ago. I was coaching, I was mental coaching a coach, and we were going through her recording and her transcript of a real session. And her client was talking at one stage, quite early in the session. The client was talking for about 1.5, 2 minutes, maybe even 3 minutes. So it was quite a lot going on there. And right in the middle of that, he said, but what I need to deal with is I have this excuse that I need to keep putting the project off. So it was a procrastination kind of thing. And when he'd finished that bit of speaking, that bit of current narrative, she asked him a great question. She asked him, so what's getting in your way? He had already told her that. That pivotal area was what I've just told you about. And what happened, even though she asked a great question, was that he started responding as clients normally do, but above the waterline. Everything he said from then on was above the waterline. So they started coaching the issue, the problem, rather than the person. So the third thing that I think we could do to transform our coaching sessions and our clients' lives is to reflect and explore. And I've put the reason why I put the and in capitals, I hope will become clear as I start describing this. So reflection is powerful. It's powerful when we clarify for the benefit of the client, not when we're clarifying for our own purposes. It's powerful when we articulate our reflection, the reflection, in a way that raises the client's awareness. But there are dangers to reflection. And I think we need to be careful about this. One of the things that we often taught in coach training schools is that we need to reflect. if we quite a few coaches that I've met or coached, several, lots, in fact, do a lot of reflection. And the danger then is that the client, they're just repeating what the person is saying. Then the first thing is the client starts thinking, but I know what I've said. So maybe they don't think you must think I'm stupid, but they think something close to that. Why do you keep repeating what I'm saying? That's what's going on in their heads. More significantly for me is that I've noticed that when coaches reflect a lot, the energy goes in, more energy goes into the reflection. They use up so much of their energy trying to remember what the client said, and they end up not having energy for the question. So the question that they ask is invariably weak. It's often closed, a closed question rather than an open one, and they don't get it right, so they start layering question on top of question. But what we need to do is to, I'll come back to that in a moment. The other danger is that when we just reflect to the client continues with their current narrative, their current story. And their current story is in their rearview mirror. If you're driving a car, they're looking into the past. And they get stuck there because we as coaches are just reflecting exactly that past behavior, that past story. If we look at what there's a coaching communication cycle. So what happens normally is that the coach initiates the communication by asking a question. The client responds with whatever, with let's say their current story, and then the coach should respond to that. Okay. I just want to check okay. So the first thing I'd like to suggest to you is that we need to distinguish between reflective inquiry and reflective exploration. Okay, so inquiry is when we ask one question. Okay, so they respond, client responds, and we ask one question. Exploration is when they've responded for the second time, we explore that again and keep going around. So be aware of the difference between inquiry and exploration. The ICF actually distinguish between it as well in their markers. Try not to ask one-off questions. Try to take, and we'll do a little bit of that in a moment. Try to take what the client is saying and ask a question based on that. So I've talked about the client having a current narrative, a current story. And what we need to remember that one of the purposes of coaching is to help the client go beyond their current narrative, to stop looking in the rearview mirror and to look in the windscreen, through the windscreen into the future. To do this, we need to ask discovery questions rather than information questions. Information questions are where the client knows the answer. So that's stuff that's in the past. They know what's happened, and they can give you the answers. Discovery questions are when they need to discover. They need to go further than they are now. They need to go beyond their current story. They don't know the answer. And often we don't know either. And those are the best questions to ask. And so, in a way, to carry on the rearview mirror windscreen metaphor, it's like an automatic transmission. When the client is telling their current story, they are in reverse, okay, and they stuck in reverse. We need to change gear. We need to start asking, and normally that's because we're asking information questions. If they keep going back, we've probably asked them an information question. But we need to change gear and ask discovery questions so that they can move into drive. Okay. So the fourth way relates to how we use little fires and loose threads. And you'll see that that's a quote. It's a quote from Michael Neal. Neal is spelled N-I-E-L-L, 2 L's. And he's an international coach. He does a lot of stuff on video and podcasts and things, and he's lovely. He's one of my favorite international coaches, and he did a podcast in January called "Little Fires and Loose Threads," and these are normally things. These are things below the waterline. So he suggests that we tug on loose threads, any loose thread in the current narrative, that we just take that and we ask a question about it, and then ask a question about that response. The little fires is an interesting one, because I'd heard about loose threads before, but the little fires was new to me. He says, when our clients have an insight, an aha moment, we need to pour fuel, sorry, that should be fuel, onto those little fires, so that it grows, that aha moment, that insight grows. And so the question here is how can you then use that little fire to take the client below the waterline? If I use this example, sometimes our clients might show emotion. So let's say they tear up, they look like they're going to start crying. We often would say to them, you look like you're becoming emotional, are you okay? And they say, yes, no, I'm okay, and then you move on. But that's an opportunity to pour some diesel onto it. So what's happening for you right now? And then work from there. Because normally a change in energy, a change in emotion, a change in all the non-verbals is an insight. So we need to try and make that insight bigger, as I say. And most of that starts below the waterline. And then how can you use that and explore rather than inquire? So I often joke, but I think it's worth remembering. I often joke that listening for something is twice as good as listening to something. And so if you start listening for those loose threads and those little fires, like I said about the coach that I was mental coaching a couple of weeks ago, if she was looking for that thing below, that pivotal comment below the waterline, she could have made a big difference. So the fifth one, and as I said earlier, there probably are a lot more. I'm just picking out 5 that I think are the most important, is that we need to look for sustainable growth. And so what we have, and I'm going to come back to this later, is I often compare a coaching session or relate a coaching session to bookends, where you have one bookend that's around contracting, where the books go is kind of, we call the coaching, and then the second bookend is when we're talking about actions and things. And I think it's really interesting that the ICF have moved from talking about actions in their core competencies to facilitating growth and learning. When we get to that second bookend, the relief monster often comes. We ask them, so, you know, what have you learned? Sorry, what are you taking away? And then they tell us, and then we relieved again, because they've got an action. But it is an opportunity to create sustainable growth. Those actions are normally one-off things that they tell us about. It's not going to change their habits at all, and it's not going to help them to grow and to learn. So some of you may be familiar with the distinction between horizontal growth and vertical growth. I'm talking about us doing both of those, not just the horizontal growth at the bottom. Okay. So the horizontal growth at the bottom is often around skills and competence. Whereas, and I try to search for the right word here, the best I could think of is maturity. It's a growing, it's a development over time that we can't rush. We might be able to rush the skills and competence part. So another way of distinguishing this is between actions and awareness. We need both of those. So if I give you some examples, coaches often at the end will say, what are you taking away today? But compare that to, so what have you learned today about your Rubik's Cube, your situation? And then another level down is, what have you learned about yourself today? Those are very different questions to what are you taking away today? What we're after, if we're going to transform our coaching and transform our clients, is for them to learn new habits, a new way of being, or new habits that create a new way of being in their Rubik's Cube. And that's more substantial than just actions. It's more sustainable. So actions, you will achieve short or medium term goals. But if you want your client, if your client wants to be at their best more of the time, then we're talking about their way of being. And again, for me, I think that the actions are above the waterline, and the new habits, new way of being, are below the waterline. I'm not sure if you're familiar with neuroplasticity. Neuroscientists tell us that, just quickly explain it in case you're not. Neuroscientists explain it as every thought that we have changes the structure in our brain. I'm not an expert at this, but I think it's the synapses in our brain that grow stronger. So that's okay if it's if it's a good habit that we're talking about, because every time we repeat it, that gets stronger. But if it's a bad habit, the same thing happens. So what we need to do in our coaching sessions is to make sure that the new actions are repeated and repeated until they become new habits. So earlier I used the first two of these, but what if you ask the questions, what have you learned about your situation today? They answer, and you might take something out of that and explore it. And then you ask, what have you learned about yourself today? And again, you explore that. And then a third question, how can you use what you've learned today to inform what you do going forward every day? That will create sustainable growth, or start to. So to summarize, transforming is about, you can't end strongly unless you start strongly. So contract more deeply. Listen above, but especially below the waterline. Reflect and explore. Look for those, or listen for those little fires and loose threads, and then look for sustainable growth. Remember that we shouldn't only look to create awareness at the middle section of the coaching session. We need to create awareness at the beginning and at the end as well. But that's not enough. We need to add on to that sustainable growth and development. So I'd like you to go back to your thoughts at the beginning of this presentation, and remember the one thing you thought you might change in order to transform your coaching sessions, and to rethink it. And you don't have to put this in the chat room, it's for you to consider. What positive lesson did you learn about yourself as a coach today?
So, colleagues, if you have your response, maybe it's more interesting for Lauron if you tell, not to write in chat. Yes? For me personally, it's a brilliant thought about listening for, not listening to. So I take this.
Okay, all right. Good, thank you.
So,
and now, if we add to that.
Natalia Zhigalkina. Yeah, can we? Lauron, yes? Natasha.
My lesson about myself as a coach, I would like to answer this. One great message from you was for me as a coach not to be afraid to go deeper with the client. That's my very valuable thought that I'm taking away, because we are working at the level what and level who. So the level what is the level of the situation, and the level who is the deeper level. And usually we try to customize for the client, to ask him and to try to feel what is the level the client wants to go for. So the depth is dictated by the client. Yeah. And what you have told, that not being afraid to go to the deeper level, it will be in any way beneficial for the client, whether whether it seems to us that he is ready to go to the deeper level or not. So yeah. for me, the message is that don't limit myself, don't make a decision for the client, not to go on the deeper level, not being afraid to go deeper.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's great. And you've picked up on something like that who and what. If you go deeper in the beginning, or prepare to go deeper and challenge your client, the competencies around coaching the whole person. Later, you've set yourself up for that already in the beginning. Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Natalia. I'm going to go into, because there are two more questions on top of this for people to think of. So the next question is, how can you use what you've learned about yourself to transform your coaching? And Natalia answered part of that. Answered that. And then the last question is, now how can you make this a habit? How can you do it, ensure you do it in every session, or virtually every session? So just think about that for a moment. Okay.
Женя.
Brilliant masterclass. If to answer to this question, what I thought, as we learned from our last lesson, if you receive new knowledges, you should practice. So then it's become a habit. So my goal is for the next few months is to practice and start deep from the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there's that learning model or learning process that starts off. You may be familiar with it. In the beginning, we are unconsciously incompetent. We don't know what we don't know. Then we are consciously competent. We know what we realize what we don't know. Then we are consciously competent, and that's the practice part, until we become unconsciously competent, where the new habit is on autopilot. But we can't. Often we try to skip that third part, but we can't. We have to practice. Okay, thank you.
Nadia.
Hello. Thank you very much for a brilliant presentation. And I think I'm taking with me again the Marsha Reynolds with please coach the person, not the problem. But in here, I would like to ask you, you were mentioning about the who level and what level. Are there any levels of the who level? How we could go deeper?
I think it's about listening for that way of being, listening below the waterline, picking up beliefs that they may have that are misdirecting them. You know, often we learned our beliefs. We've learned some of our beliefs when we were very young, and they served us then. But sometimes they no longer serve us, but we still carry on with the beliefs. And my my late mother, one day she's going to send a bolt of lightning down, but I often tell the story that she meant really well. She was a lovely person. But she would say, what will the neighbors think? So I grew up being over-considerate and always thinking about everyone else. And then one day when, I don't know, might have been in my late 20s or 30s, where I suddenly thought, well, you know, who really cares what they think if what I believe is, if I believe I'm right? And so I've tried to temper that need to always be over-considerate. Obviously, you need to be considerate. Sometimes our greatest strengths are our greatest weaknesses as well, when we overdo them. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's about maybe the deeper level. At the first level down, you're looking at their way of being. Then maybe you're looking at their way of thinking. Then you're trying to pick up the more detailed parts, like what are the beliefs that they're talking about, or their reasons, or their values. What values are coming out? But that's quite a deep level. That I have difficulty with that.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Pleasure. Okay. So if I can round off, if you found today useful, I am giving the other talks, and Irina will get invites to them if you can pass them on. I'm giving this one next Wednesday in a webinar, and then the week after that, Wednesday after that, 5 models I find indispensable. Then 5 lessons I've learned about building a coaching business, and then 5 common mistakes coaches often make, which is the webinar I gave last night. And so I repeat those the first 4 Wednesdays of every month. I'd also like to offer you something hopefully of value, and that is a free subscription to my monthly newsletter. It's free anyway, but I just want to say you don't have to pay for it. I focus on it. I have a similar style to, I think, when I present. I look at some aspect of coaching theory and then practicalize it and actually give you a practice that you can go off and practice. So if you'd like that, I don't know how you want to say that. They could put the email in the chat room, and maybe you could send me the copy of that.
How is better? Will you give me a link to deliver to our coaches, or you prefer they place their emails now in the chat?
I think if they want it, I don't want to. You know, they may not want to. So that's if somehow we could. Those that want to could get their emails to me one way or the other. It doesn't
Okay, guys, if you want, please put your emails now in chat box, and then we will send them to Lauron.
Okay, that's great. The next edition is coming out next Thursday, so look out for it. Okay. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Yes, I do have. Can I? It's a lot of coaches here are preparing to take ACC, PCC exams, and I am personally preparing to take MCC, as I know. So my question is, at what maybe time or point of your professional life, and by what criteria did you understand that you are already on the MCC coach level?
Sorry, I probably need to tell you a little story about that. My personal story is that the first lesson I learned in going for my MCC is that it's not a tick box exercise. The deeper you get into coaching, the more it's a journey that you're on. I think I took the wrong route, in the sense that I think I was tick boxing a little bit, and as I think there's only about a 3% to 5%, I heard that earlier this week, pass rate for MCC first time round. And so my submissions were, I didn't pass the first time. So you have 6 months then to submit to resubmit your transcriptions and your recordings. And I did a couple, and I knew that I didn't like them, but I was always going to get around to doing some more, and I didn't. And I thought I had another month left, and I thought I'd better look, and I only had 1 week, so I had to use those recordings that I had, which I didn't like. And it was mainly around, I think I'd been more directive. I think I advised or suggested, or all those fine things, too much in the session, and they came back to me and they passed me, but their areas of development were around asking questions, which I thought would happen. So I was lucky to get my MCC, but when I got it, I kind of thought, well, now you're a phony. You need to start mastering what you didn't master before. You need to go on that journey that you try to avoid. And so I really set out, I set several goals for myself to master various aspects of coaching. And that's where I think I improved quite a lot. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Irina. Does it?
Yes, thank you. Very, very motivated answer.
Yeah, you know, and I often think that at each level, it's about that practice. And what coaches often do is they look at the other requirements the ICF have, so coach training hours, coach experience hours, and so they'll say, well, I'm nowhere near 2,500 hours, so I'm not going to do my MCC yet, or I'm not going to do my mentor coaching yet. But I think that that's the time, you know, you've got 2,000 hours to practice at the right level. So you should start your mentor coaching earlier rather than later. Because it's all about, if you've looked at demo coaching on YouTube at ACC, PCC, MCC level, it's all about flow at MCC level. It's not only about flow, but that's what sticks out.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? We haven't needed our interpreter, our translator.
Yes, Olga Nizenko.
Hi, first of all, thank you for a great and motivating presentation. Thank you very much for efforts that you're doing and your support to Ukraine that you've made at the beginning. I'm still a student. That's why basically my question is concerning your recommendations probably, or questions that you want us to think about for those who just start their path, the way to coaching?
So just repeat that last, the question.
Yeah, so basically my question is, what would be your recommendations, your advices, or probably questions we need to think about, we who are the only beginners who just start our path through coaching?
Okay, great question, thank you. I think if I look at people who are starting, novice coaches, inexperienced coaches at ACC level, let's say, the focus in the beginning is on the next question. What's my next question? You know, often they'll compile a list of their favorite questions, you know, and maybe have it next to them. And please don't do that. Okay. The big change happens that at MCC level, the change from that is listening, the level that you listen at. That Michael Neal that I quoted earlier, the little fires and loose threads, he teaches coaching, and he says his process has 2 steps only, and that is show up and respond to what shows up. And that's when I do my best coaching, when I'm not thinking about the thing I want to improve, or, you know, when I just let it go, because we have it, it's in you. The more fully you're present, the better you listen, and the better your responses will be. And so they'll come from a deeper place within you. Okay. Does that help? Sorry.
Microphone.
Definitely, it helps. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So simplify it. I think that's what I've said. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, no.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your incredibly useful masterclass on the MCC level.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. I really do hope that there's stuff you can all use there. I think at whatever level you're at the moment, hopefully, even if you just concentrate on starting deeper, the rest will flow. Good luck and enjoy coaching. It's a lovely life. Thank you. Thanks, Irina.
Thank you.
Let me stop sharing. There you go.
Oh.
All right. Irina, we'll be in touch.
Thank you. I will send you a recording.
All right.
And the emails.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. And once again, I hope you all stay safe, and your families all keep safe too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.